Hello and welcome to Fearless DIY Music. My name is Tristan Lass, and today I'm joined by my dear friend Kevin Gamble. I do have my glasses on. I think I'm going to go ahead and pop those off real quick because of the glare. Joined by my dear friend Kevin Gamble, we're going to be talking about vintage instrument selling. It's something that I felt like I got ahead of a few years ago. I sold a Guild Jumbo acoustic guitar. It was mint condition, like in 1986. It was made back in the old original Guild factory. I managed to get my asking price for it with no negotiation, and I had it listed fairly high. The same went early last year with my Martin D17. It was the good one. It was before the millionth Martin, all solid mahogany, basically a D18 with a Honduran mahogany top. I managed to get my full asking price for that guitar back then as well. And Kevin has just recently parted with a couple of his instruments. It happened while I was actually visiting him in his hometown, our hometown. And he sold a couple pieces. And I guess the meta question here is, have we reached like that epigee of the vintage market? If you have vintage instruments that you're not in love with or that were investment pieces, is this the time to sell before they start to taper down and maybe come down in value? A lot of people have been, talking about that eventually is going to happen. It's part of the natural flow of the marketplace. Also, given economic challenges currently faced by a lot of households and people in America, I think that we're going to see more and more vintage things coming up, and we might see those prices start to come down a little bit if the market gets flooded with a bunch of, early 70s or late 60s Strats. Then all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, well, I have 150 to choose from instead of 25. So naturally the prices would drop. But I wanted to go ahead and have Kevin relate his recent experience. He just, like I said, he's just within the last couple weeks sold a couple of instruments. I'll let him tell all of you about his experience selling some, and they were beautiful instruments, by the way. These are not like, beaten in or, what would I say, a player grade. These were very well maintained instruments, and I would love to hear Kevin tell us all about his experience selling them. So take it away, Kevin.
Thanks, Tris. You covered most of what there is to cover on this topic in that intro, and that's really the issue I think that everyone's facing right now. And if folks want to hear more about some of the things you mentioned, you've covered some of your previous instrument sales in other videos on the channel, so people can do a search for that and see some more discussion. But yeah, it's the kind of the $64 question about what is the future of this market going to look like? When is that crash going to happen? And crash might be a harsh word, but I think that is kind of what's going to happen to some extent because, the trend lines we're looking at wouldn't seem to support anything else. It seems like with a lot of instrument values, it's kind of a domino effect that starts back with probably the 60s Fenders and Gibsons for the most part, technically all the way to the 50s, but, those are so unobtainable, but they're going to be more obtainable. That is the direction things are going to be going, is that players who've had these instruments their whole lives and bought them new back in the 60s, or who got them, much before now, they're going to be selling them. They're going to be passing them down to their kids who are going to be selling them. These, things that have been held on to for so many years, a lot more of them are going to come into the market. And that's what sets the whole rest of the market because, people don't get late 70s Fenders just because they're the absolute magic. They get them because they can't get the 60s Fenders or the 50s Fenders for the most part. I shouldn't say that completely. There are some specific things from those eras that people look for, but I think effectively the whole rest of the market is set by that initial peak of value in the early Fenders and Gibsons, and at some point that's going to change. And the other things you mentioned, economic times are not going to encourage people to spend upward into the market. and the constant influx of new instruments of good quality, younger players who don't have the same associations with the vintage instruments, or their heroes might not be associated with the vintage instruments. There are so many factors that are kind of going to be pushing that down. I think just in the next few years, at the most, we'll see a big change. And so all of those thoughts fed into my thinking. I had a couple very nice 70s Fender Precision basses that I've had for, one I've had for over 20 years, the other I've had for, maybe half that time. And as you said, they're great instruments. They're in great condition. They're lovely. They've got that wonderful sort of 70s aesthetic about them. But after a time, my thinking kind of shifted, and I think especially doing some recording projects lately made me realize that I don't need to have a 1970s Fender Precision in order to get the sound of a Precision on a record. I don't need to have a 60s Strat to get the sound of a Strat. I've got a mid 90s Mexican Strat that is my Strat. It's a Strat Special. It's got the humbucker and the bridge, and it sounds great. It feels great. It looks great. It plays well, and
it's a good guitar. I played it while I was there. It's a great guitar.
I think that's going to be the calculus for a lot of people, where you've got so many other options for just enjoying playing a guitar and getting a good sound out of it, that I really just came to a point where I thought I don't enjoy being an instrument collector, so to speak, because I felt like I had to treat them extra gingerly and sensitive to wear on them, because if you start maintaining them and repairing them, that cuts into their your cost benefit equation over time. So finally I decided it was time to just get out of the business of owning expensive instruments, and so I sold those. I've got my Fender Precision now is an early 2000s, and I don't know if at this point, if I own an instrument that would top $1,000, possibly, one or two, but for the most part, much less than that. And I've never been happier, I think, with what I've got as a result. I've got instruments that feel great, that play, just how I want them to play, that sound good, recorded, and they look, great. And it feels like a relief to get out of that kind of rat race and not have to guess, am I going to hold this for 1 year too long and have the value of it crash? Like I said, it's a guessing game at this point, but it seems like we have to be close to that tipping point where the top of the market is going to reset everything down below it. And there will be oddities that hold on to their value, but I think we're probably close to the peak of a lot of guitar values from a lot of eras.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with your assessment. Before we kind of like go to our final, the final bit of this, I will ask you, exactly, how you went about selling them and how you felt about the prices that you got. Just if you could answer that really briefly after I just give my little spiel about. I'm in kind of the same boat. I have, I have my old LGOs, which maybe pushing into the $1,500 range, and that's about as high as they ever got. I could probably still sell some of my old Gibson acoustics. I have the Guilds, but the Guilds are so beat in or heavily modified. That's the problem with all of my vintage stuff. All of my vintage stuff is not even close to being original. So I sold my only two high value guitars. So it's the same thing. I had two high value guitars, and I got rid of them in the last 3 years, kind of seeing that same curve. Now, how did you feel about the prices that you got, and then what was your main portal for selling them?
I felt good about the prices. I think I was a little eager to sell them because I was ready to shift out of this space. And so I wasn't going to do the thing of setting them, $1,000 too high and waiting a year for just the right person to come along. So the prices I got were pretty average for if you go to Reverb, which is where I sold them, and look at the sold listings, that's a great way to gauge where the reality of the market is. Even that varies a lot, but I got typical to be expected value out of both of them. So it's still a good time to get a good price out of the guitars. But when I look back at how long I've owned them and inflation and so forth, I realize that it's not the most spectacular return on an investment, so to speak. When you look at the way the market has kind of followed inflation and so forth, it wasn't a radical return at all. But there was still some good interest, good demand. But I also see a lot of other instruments that, when they're just a little bit higher priced, will sit out there for a very long time and aren't disappearing. When I got these instruments that I just sold originally, these things would come and go very quickly, and you had to jump on them right away. Now I see things sitting out there a bit longer unless they're really underpriced. So got a good solid price. Seems like a good time to sell. The demand is still pretty good, but not as quick of a turnaround as you might expect, from a previous time. So yeah, it could be a good, if someone's looking for something, in order to have it, this is probably getting to be a good time to buy. But if I was looking for one now, I'm not even sure I'd expect a return on it if I was going to go buy one of those instruments. I mean, I don't see them getting much more valuable than they are. To be honest, the value of the instruments I sold has been fairly level for a while now, even going back the last few years. So I just don't see that line jumping up again. I don't see another big boost coming down the line. So get them for their inherent worth to you, but I would not go to buy those instruments as investments at this point. I just don't see it increasing much beyond where it is now, and soon it will decrease. That's my guess. That's my Karnak the Magician guess. We'll see where that goes.
I think that's really accurate. And I think the other cautionary thing about getting into the vintage market at this point is that, don't buy to invest, buy to play them. Buy it because it's something that just either fulfills a wish, a long-held wish that, I really want that 1953, Strat, or, I really want that 69, P-Bass, or whatever it is that you're looking for, or an amplifier or whatever. Amp market seems to have really cooled off. You can, like, I was pricing my 65 Showman just out of curiosity, and I was kind of shocked by how much they dropped, because there was a peak about 10 years ago where those things were like, my amp was worth thousands more than it is now. It's just like, so the tube amp, the big overpowered tube amp market, vintage, everybody's ditched that. So that's a cautionary tale for the rest of it too, because people will be like, well, I could buy a really nice Squier P-Bass and modify it a little bit, and it'll be great. The other thing that I wanted to say, I did get high doubling or tripling my money on everything that I've sold in the vintage market, but that was because I worked in retail. So I bought things off the store wall where I worked and managed the store, and I got those at just a hair over cost. And that's the benefit of working in a music store. So for me, selling those was a no-brainer, because it was just like, if I bought it for $700 and then I'm selling it for $2,500, that is a return on investment. But that's only in those specific, circumstances. I think you're right. I think that you're going to see your margins get smaller and smaller over time at this point. So anyway, it's just something that I thought would be interesting, because I was witnessing Kevin, parting with a couple of his, collector pieces, and I thought his reasoning was sound. He just gave you his reasons and how he's kind of like, judging the market. We both watch these things constantly. I'm always thinking about old Japanese Tokais and things like that, which fortunately have never gone crazy. So, and I think they're going to keep coming down. I'm beginning to notice that late 70s Tokai Strats are just starting to become like, you can get them for like $500 or $600 again, which gets me interested, because I'm like, now that's the vintage market that I can get into. Yes. But anyway, any final words, Kev? I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up after if you have anything
Well,
left to
just
say.
yeah, I think you've covered a lot. I think that message of, get it because you love it, get it because it speaks to you, get it because you want to use it, and you love using it, and make it your own. That's
Yeah.
that's the kind of value that you'll never feel nervous about. You'll never wonder about. If you pick your tools for that reason, then you'll always be happy with it. So otherwise, good luck hitting the market at the right time and getting out of it at the right time.
Agreed. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching this video. If you've made it this far into the video, please hit like and subscribe. Shares are also greatly appreciated, and leave something in the comments. Have any of you out there recently sold or bought a vintage instrument? Did you buy it to play? Did you buy it to invest? Anything that you want to share about your story. All right. You take care, hit subscribe, and we'll see you next time.